My son's perfect, creative hands were burned in an act of cruelty I couldn't comprehend. I swore I would burn down the world of everyone responsible, and I always keep my promises. My world, the one that truly mattered, was built out of Lego bricks on a Sunday afternoon. It was a sprawling, chaotic city that covered half the living room floor, a monument to the imagination of my 10-year-old son, Leo. I wasn't a billionaire in that room. I was just Dad, the clumsy assistant architect whose job was to find the specific 2x4 flat gray piece that was absolutely essential for the structural integrity of the new spaceport. Leo was the master builder, his brow furrowed in concentration, his small hands moving with a delicate precision I'd always admired. He had my eyes, but his mother's hands, long, slender fingers meant for creating. He wanted to be an artist, or maybe an engineer. He hadn't decided yet. I always told him he had the hands for both. "Dad, we need more transparent blue ones for the force field," he'd said, not looking up. "The Galactic Federation can't hold back the Korg without a level 7 shield." "On it, Chief," I'd replied, digging through the massive plastic tub. Those were the moments I lived for. Not the multi-million-dollar deals, not the boardroom takeovers. Not the fawning articles in business magazines, just this, the quiet hum of a happy child, the satisfying click of plastic bricks, the shared sacred space of our make-believe world. It was a world I had built around him, a fortress of normalcy and love to protect him from the gilded cage my own success had created. I sent him to a good private school, but not the most ostentatious one. I wanted him to have friends, not sycophants. I thought I was protecting him. I was a fool. The call came the next day, a Tuesday. I was in a video conference with our Tokyo office, finalizing a deal that would reshape the logistics industry. My personal phone, the one reserved for Leo's school and my inner circle, buzzed on the polished mahogany of my desk. I glanced at the caller ID, Northwood Preparatory. I excused myself from the call, a flicker of annoyance turning to a cold dread. The school never called. "Mr. Sterling?" It was the school nurse, her voice strained, trying too hard to be calm. "There's been an accident. In the science lab. It's Leo. He's been burned." The world tilted. The billion-dollar figures on my screen blurred into meaningless symbols. Burned. The word echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of my office. I don't remember ending the video conference. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. All I remember is a prayer, a desperate silent bargain with a God I hadn't spoken to in years, repeating over and over again, asterisk, please, not his hands. Take anything else, but please, not his hands. I found him in a private room I'd arranged with a single phone call, a small, pale figure lost in a bed that was too big for him. And his hands, his perfect creative hands, were swaddled in thick white bandages, resting on pillows on either side of him. A sob caught in my throat, a raw, jagged thing. He was sedated, his face tear-streaked even in sleep. The doctor, a man I could have bought and sold 100 times over, spoke to me in hushed, clinical tones. Second-degree burns, possibly some third. Something about a Bunsen burner and a metal ruler. A tragic accident. They were very sorry. I sat by his bed for hours, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. The fury began to build then, a cold, dark tide rising from the pit of my stomach. An accident. No, I knew my son. He was meticulous, careful. He wasn't the kind of boy to have an accident like this. When he finally woke, his eyes, my eyes, were clouded with pain and a fear that was worse than the pain. He looked at his bandaged hands and began to cry, silent, heartbreaking tears that tracked paths through the grime on his cheeks. I held a cup of water with a straw to his lips. "Leo, buddy," I whispered, my voice thick. "Can you tell me what happened? The doctor said it was an accident." He flinched, his eyes darting towards the door, as if he expected someone to burst in. He shook his head, his lips trembling. "It doesn't matter," he mumbled into his pillow. "It matters to me," I said, my voice hardening. "Leo, look at me. Tell me." He finally turned his face to me, and what I saw there shattered the last of my composure. It was shame. My son, the victim, was ashamed. They did it," he whispered, the words barely audible. "Tristan, Blake, and Julian. They were mad I won the science fair. They said a scholarship kid didn't deserve it." The cold tide of fury became a glacier. A slow-moving, unstoppable force of absolute destruction. Tristan Davenport, Blake Mortimer, Julian Cheney, I knew the names. Their fathers were minor titans in their own right. A hedge fund manager, a real estate mogul, the son of a senator. Men who moved in my circles, men who thought their wealth and their names were shields. They held me down, Leo continued, his voice cracking. Tristan, he heated the metal ruler with the burner. He said he wanted to see if my genius hands could feel it. I closed my eyes. The image burned itself onto the back of my eyelids. My son, my gentle, brilliant boy, pinned down by entitled monsters while his future was seared away from him. When I opened them, the world had a new, terrifying clarity. The grief was gone, replaced by a purpose so pure and so cold, it felt like a religious calling. I leaned in and kissed his forehead. They will pay for this, Leo, I promised him, my voice a low growl. I swear on your mother's grave, they will regret the day they were ever born. The next morning, I was in Headmaster Thompson's office. With me were the parents. Mrs. Davenport, dripping in Chanel, looked bored. Mr. Mortimer was scrolling through stocks on his phone. The Cheneys hadn't even bothered to show up, sending a smarmy lawyer in their place. Thompson wrung his hands, spouting platitudes about a thorough investigation and boys being boys. Mrs. Davenport finally deigned to speak, her voice dripping with condescension. Frankly, Mr. Sterling, our Tristan says your boy is sensitive, prone to making things up for attention. It's a common trait among his background. My blood ran cold. She was calling my son a liar. She was dismissing the deliberate torture of my child as a cry for attention from the poor little scholarship kid. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even move. I simply looked at each of them, memorizing their smug, arrogant faces. I let the silence stretch until even Mortimer looked up from his phone. Then, I pulled out my own phone. I didn't look at them. I just dialed a single number. Quote, 15, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. Quote, 16. I hung up. Mrs. Davenport let out a little scoff. Quote, 17, I finally looked up, a slow, predatory smile touching my lips for the first time. Quote, 18. I said softly. Quote, 19, Mr. Mortimer's face had gone completely white. He was the only one in the room who understood. He was frantically typing on his phone, his thumb shaking. He knew what Protocol Chimera meant. He knew the world had just ended. The effect was not immediate, but it was absolute. Mortimer's phone began to vibrate violently against the polished wood of the table, a frantic, buzzing dance of death. He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color until it was the shade of old parchment. Margin call, he whispered, the words catching in his throat. They're calling it all in, all of it. Across from him, Mrs. Davenport's perfectly sculpted mask of arrogance began to crack. She was trying to call her husband, a sneer still lingering on her lips, but the call wouldn't connect. Then a text message appeared on her screen. Her eyes widened. She tried to stand, her expensive chair scraping harshly against the floor. Quote, 22, the lawyer, the smarmy one sent by the Cheneys, had gone quiet. He was receiving a flood of emails, his own phone buzzing like an angry hornet. He looked at me, a sheen of sweat on his upper lip, the first flicker of genuine fear dawning in his eyes. He finally understood he wasn't dealing with some new money upstart he could bully with legal jargon. He was in a cage with something he didn't understand, and I had just locked the door. Headmaster Thompson just sat there, utterly paralyzed, looking back and forth between us as if watching a car crash in slow motion. Quote, 23, Mrs. Davenport shrieked, her voice a shrill, ugly thing. Quote, 24, I rose slowly from my chair, the leather sighing softly. I didn't look at her. I looked at the trembling headmaster. You will expel them, I said, my voice level and cold. Tristan Davenport, Blake Mortimer, and Julian Cheney. You will expel them by noon today for the deliberate and malicious assault of another student. You will release a statement to the school community detailing exactly what they did. If you do not, by noon tomorrow, this school will no longer exist. Its funding will be gone, its accreditations will be challenged, and every one of your donors will have mysteriously found a new philanthropic cause. Am I clear?" He nodded, a jerky, puppet-like motion. I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. I looked back at the three of them, a tableau of collapsing worlds. "You see," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "money is a tool. You use it to buy jewelry and silence your problems. I use it to buy everything else. Your assets, your reputations, your futures. Today, I'm buying justice for my son, and the price is everything you have." I walked out, leaving the sound of Mrs. Davenport's hysterics echoing behind me. Back at the hospital, the sterile quiet was a balm. Leo was awake, watching a cartoon on the tablet I'd brought him. He was trying to use the stylus with his mouth to change the volume, his bandaged hands lying uselessly at his sides. The sight of his struggle reignited the cold fire in my gut. I sat down and adjusted it for him, ruffling his hair. "How are you feeling, champ?" "It hurts," he said, his voice small. Will I be able to build my Legos again?" I felt my heart break all over again. The question wasn't about the pain, or the boys, or the injustice. It was about the simple joy that had been stolen from him. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Quote, 32, __. He gave me a weak smile, and it was like the sun coming out. This was why I was doing it. This smile. My phone buzzed. It was Elias. I stepped out into the hallway. Quote, 33, I said. Quote, 34, Elias's voice was crisp, efficient. Davenport's primary fund just had a catastrophic investor pullout. He'll be bankrupt by Friday. Mortimer's biggest development project just lost its zoning approval and its primary lender in the same hour. And the Cheneys, well, let's just say a certain senator is about to be the star of a career-ending federal investigation into illegal campaign funds from a foreign entity. The families are broken. "Good," I said. "That's a start." "That's the financial side, Richard," Elias said, and I could hear the change in his tone. This was no longer business. I dug into the school, like you asked, into Headmaster Thompson. He's been taking donations from those families for years to make their sons' disciplinary problems disappear. There's a long paper trail of infractions. Bullying, vandalism, cheating, all of them quietly erased from their permanent records. My knuckles went white as I gripped the phone. This wasn't just 3 boys. It was a rotten system that had protected and enabled them, time and time again, until they felt empowered enough to torture a child with a Bunsen burner. Quote, 40, Elias said, his voice dropping lower. Quote, 41, the blood pounded in my ears. A cover-up. He actively tried to destroy the evidence. Quote, 42, quote, 43, a cold dread, colder and deeper than any I had felt before, washed over me. Quote, 44, quote, _45, Elias said grimly. Quote, 46, my phone chimed. I opened the message. It was a grainy, pixelated screenshot, but the face was unmistakable. It was a boy I recognized, a boy who had been to our house, who had played Legos with Leo, who had eaten pizza on our couch. It was Marcus, Leo's best friend. The image on my phone felt like a physical blow. Marcus. Skinny, awkward Marcus with the glasses that were always sliding down his nose. The boy Leo had defended from bullies a dozen times. The boy I'd overheard them making plans with just last week to build a Lego replica of the Millennium Falcon. He wasn't one of them. He wasn't a child of wealth and privilege. His parents were teachers, good people who'd sacrificed to send their bright son to Northwood on a partial scholarship. It didn't make any sense. I stared at the image, at his pale, terrified face caught in the security camera's gaze. He was watching, just watching. My first instinct was a fresh wave of rage, a betrayal so profound it almost made me dizzy. But then I looked closer. This wasn't the face of a cold-blooded accomplice. It was the face of a hostage. The terror in his eyes wasn't just for Leo, it was for himself. I walked back into Leo's room, my mind reeling. Leo was dozing again, the tablet resting on his chest. I didn't want to wake him, didn't want to bring this new horror into his fragile world. I sat in the chair, the image of Marcus's face burned into my mind, and waited. The financial ruin of the other families suddenly felt hollow, incomplete. It was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was the culture of fear and power that allowed this to happen, a culture that could turn a friend into a silent spectator. Later that evening, after the doctors had checked on Leo and changed his dressings, a procedure that brought fresh tears to my stoic son's eyes, I decided I had to ask. I had to know. I waited until he was calm again, his breathing even. Quote, 47, I started gently. Quote, 48, He looked at me, his eyes wide. He didn't look relieved. He looked scared. What did you do? He whispered. I made sure there were consequences, I said, choosing my words carefully. Leo, when it happened, was anyone else there? He stiffened immediately. His gaze dropped to the white cocoon that encased his hands. He shook his head, a little too quickly. No, just them. He was lying. My son, who had never lied to me in his life, was lying to my face. And I knew instantly he wasn't doing it to protect himself. He was protecting Marcus. My heart ached. Even now, after everything, his first instinct was to shield his friend. Quote, 53, I said softly, hating myself for pushing him, but knowing I had to. Quote, 54, A single tear escaped his eye and traced a path down his cheek. He wouldn't look at me. It wasn't his fault, he mumbled into his pillow. Don't hurt his family, Dad. Please. Hurt his family. The words were a gut punch. My son was afraid of me, afraid of what my power, my rage could do. In my quest for righteous vengeance, I had terrified my own child. I won't, I promised, my voice thick with emotion. I would never. But you have to tell me what happened. I need to understand. He took a shaky breath. They were going to do it to him too, he said, his voice cracking. Marcus won second place in the science fair. They cornered him first. They said they were going to make sure his nerd hands couldn't hold a pencil again. I tried to stop them. I pushed Tristan. And then they all turned on me. Blake and Julian held me down. Tristan told Marcus that if he moved, if he told anyone, they'd do the same to him and then to his little sister. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of cruelty so calculated it was almost incomprehensible. They hadn't just tortured my son. They had created a witness, an unwilling accomplice bound by terror. They had made Marcus watch, forcing him to be a party to his friend's agony as a promise of what awaited him if he defied them. It was a level of psychological sadism that went beyond simple bullying. It was monstrous. My rage returned, but it was different now. It was no longer a blunt instrument. It was a scalpel. Ruining the families wasn't enough. It was too clean, too distant. They needed to understand what they had created. They needed to feel a fraction of the helplessness and terror they had inflicted on those two boys. Quote, 61, I said, stroking his hair. Quote, 62, I stayed with him until he fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. Then I stepped back out into the hall and called Elias. Quote, 63, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Quote, 64, quote, 65, Elias asked, a rare note of caution in his voice. Quote, 66, I said. Quote, 67, The next evening, I left Leo in the care of a private nurse and drove. My destination wasn't a boardroom or a bank, but a quiet, tree-lined street in a wealthy suburb. I parked my unremarkable sedan a block away from a sprawling, brightly lit mansion. Elias's intel was, as always, perfect. Robert Davenport was home, alone. His wife had left him that morning after their last credit card was declined. The staff had been let go. It was just him, a bottle of expensive scotch, and the echoing emptiness of his failed empire. I walked up the stone pathway, not to the front door, but around the side, through the manicured gardens now starting to look neglected. I found the study window, just as Elias's report had described. The lights were on. Inside, Davenport was pacing, his face haggard, a phone pressed to his ear. He was shouting, pleading with someone on the other end. I didn't knock. I had a different way of announcing my presence. I took out my own phone and dialed a number. Inside the study, Davenport's phone went silent. He looked at it, confused, then threw it against the wall where it shattered. But my call wasn't to his phone. A second later, every screen in the house, the massive television over the fireplace, the tablet on his desk, the smart display in the kitchen I could see through the doorway, flickered to life. They all showed the same thing, the restored security footage from the Northwood chemistry lab. It was crystal clear, the audio sharp and horrifying. On every screen, Robert Davenport could now see and hear, in high definition, exactly what his son had done. He froze, his face a mask of disbelief, watching as Tristan heated the ruler, hearing his own son's cruel laughter. He stumbled back, clutching his chest, and then every speaker in the house crackled to life. It wasn't the audio from the video. It was my voice, broadcast from my phone, low and clear and everywhere at once. "Hello, Robert," I said. "Now we can have a real conversation. Let's talk about your son." Davenport spun around, his eyes wild with terror, searching the opulent room for the source of my voice. He looked at the shattered phone on the floor, then at the screens displaying his son's monstrous act, a digital ghost haunting his collapsing life. Quote underscore 70, he screamed into the empty air. Quote underscore 71, I said. My voice echoing from the surround sound system he'd probably paid a fortune for. What I wanted was for my son to be safe. It's a little late for that, so now I want you to understand. I want you to feel it. That cold dread in the pit of your stomach, the feeling that your entire world is glass and someone is holding a hammer. That's just a taste of what my son felt when yours held him down. The video looped, playing again. Tristan's sneering face, the blue flame of the Bunsen burner, Leo's muffled cries. Davenport sank into a leather armchair, his head in his hands, a broken man in a broken room. "I'll pay," he croaked. "Whatever you want. I'll pay for his medical bills. You think this is about money?" I cut him off, my voice sharp as broken glass. "Your money is worthless. It's the disease. You bought your son's way out of trouble his entire life. You taught him that there are no consequences. Well, the lesson begins now. On the screen, the video was replaced by a live feed from a camera mounted on a utility pole across the street, showing the front of his house. The flashing blue and red lights of 3 police cars silently pulled up to his curb. "The Northwood Police Department just received an anonymous tip," I continued, my voice calm. "A high-resolution video file showing a felony assault on a minor, and a detailed report of a school headmaster who accepted bribes to cover it up. It seems Headmaster Thompson, facing federal charges, has decided to cooperate fully. Your son, Mr. Davenport, is about to face a kind of justice he can't buy his way out of." The doorbell rang, a sharp, piercing chime that seemed to make the entire house shake. Davenport didn't move. He just sat there, listening to the insistent ringing, a prisoner in his own home. I cut the connection. My work there was done. Michael Mortimer was next. Now, I found him not at home, but at an exclusive members-only golf club, trying to salvage his reputation over drinks with the few quote 79 who would still take his calls. I didn't need to break into his home network. I owned the network. The clubs. Elias had arranged the purchase of its parent company that morning. From the club's own security room, I watched him on the monitors, laughing a little too loudly, his face flushed with alcohol. I had the bartender send over a tablet with his bill, but instead of a list of charges, it was playing the same video. In the middle of the crowded, hushed lounge, Blake Mortimer's role in the assault played out for all to see. The whispers started instantly. Men who had clapped him on the back moments before now edged their chairs away. His world didn't collapse in private. It evaporated under the judgmental stares of his peers. The police met him in the parking lot. Finally, there was Senator Cheney. He was the most protected, but also the most vulnerable. Pride and public image were the twin pillars of his career. Elias had leaked the story of the campaign finance scandal to a single, relentless investigative reporter known for her integrity. The story was breaking on the evening news just as Cheney was preparing for a fundraising gala. As his car pulled up to the venue, he was met not by cheering supporters, but by a swarm of reporters, their camera flashes like lightning, their questions like thunder. "Senator, can you comment on the allegations of illegal foreign donations?" "Senator, is it true your son Julian was just taken into police custody for a violent assault at his school?" His perfect political smile froze and then crumbled. He was ruined, live on national television. The pillars of his life turned to dust in an instant. It was over. The boys were facing the juvenile justice system, stripped of their parents' protection. Their fathers were broken, their empires in ashes, their names a synonym for disgrace. I hadn't just taken their money. I had taken their power, their prestige, and their plausible deniability. I had held a mirror up to them, and it had shattered them. When I got back to the hospital, Leo was awake, and he wasn't alone. Marcus and his parents were there. Mrs. Miller, Marcus's mom, was holding a container of homemade soup. Mr. Miller stood awkwardly by the door, his face etched with a mixture of gratitude and shame. Marcus was sitting by Leo's bed, carefully showing him a new Lego instruction manual. "See," he was saying, "if we use the hinge pieces here, we can make the S-foils open and close." Leo looked up when I came in, and for the first time since the accident, he smiled at me. A real, genuine smile, not one of fear, but of relief, of understanding. He knew I hadn't hurt Marcus's family. He knew my war was over. His recovery was long. There were surgeries and painful months of physical therapy. I was there for every single one. We rebuilt his hand's strength, one painful exercise at a time. The first time he was able to successfully click 2 Lego bricks together, we both cried. We never spoke of Tristan, Blake, or Julian again. Their names faded, becoming irrelevant footnotes in our lives. About a year later, the living room floor was once again covered in a sprawling plastic city. It was more magnificent than any that had come before it. A towering spaceport with articulated launch bay doors dominated the center. Leo, now 11, directed the construction with his old confidence. His hands, though scarred, moved with renewed grace and precision. The scars weren't a mark of what was taken from him, but a reminder of what he had survived. I was on my knees, sorting through a pile of blue, transparent pieces. "Dad," he said, not looking up from his work, "we need these for the force field." "On it, Chief," I replied, a lump forming in my throat. I handed him the pieces, and our fingers brushed. He paused and looked at his own hands, then at mine. He looked up at me, his gaze clear and steady. "Thanks, Dad," he said. It was more than just thanks for the Legos. It was for everything. It was for the justice I had bought, for the future I had secured. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the monuments of his imagination, I finally felt the cold fire in my soul extinguish. My son was safe. He was whole. And our world, the only one that truly mattered, was rebuilt, stronger than ever before.